Hello everyone, and welcome back to Tech-Xample, and welcome back to the Unleashing series, where I take old tech and use different techniques to squeeze every bit of performance out of them. Today we're going to be experimenting with the cut-down Fury card from AMD's third GCN generation, and seeing what we can squeeze out of this old beast of a card. As the lower-end normal flagship of the Fury family, you tend to be able to find the R9 Fury at much more reasonable prices compared to its higher-end siblings, Fury Nano and X. As such, it makes this particular card an enticing buy, but today we're seeing how much performance you can really get from this thing, and if it's worth buying in 2026. We're talking custom drivers, memory timings, overclocks, undervolts, the whole 9 yards here. If you want to see what the plain Jane Fury can do, check out my original video on the card, which should be popping up in the corner card. Without further ado, let's jump in. As has been the case with the other GCN cards featured on this channel so far, undervolting remains one of the most recommended tweaks to make to a card to increase performance. AMD always seemed to give each GPU just a little too much juice for its own good, and we aim to rein that in a bit. My Fury came stock at 1260 millivolts, which I pulled down to 1240 millivolts. While an absolutely tiny change, it does give a smidge of breathing room in power and temps. Unfortunately for the Fury family, AMD saw prudent to lock down memory overclocking in driver updates years ago, making any adjustments to the memory much more difficult. As such, the only way I could see to modify memory speeds and timings was through BIOS edits, which, in stark contrast to the Fury Nano, the timings were much more pliable. While the speed stayed locked at 500 MHz, I managed to tighten the timings by quite a large margin, which should help when the VRAM inevitably fills up and textures and models need to be swapped out. When trying to increase the Fury card's performance, my mind always goes to a power increase, since these cards operate under a ceiling, whether power, cooling, or clocks. And with the huge cooler bolted onto the R9 Fury, the first big limiter to tackle is power. Pumping up the power limit all the way up to 412 watts, or 50% above stock, lets this monster have as much juice as it wants. As the only VG card with less than the full 64 compute units enabled, enterprising users and tinkerers found that certain Fury cards had functional CUs that had been disabled with a software lock and, with the right tools, could be re-enabled. However, not all of these disabled units were fully functional, or even functional at all, making an unlock a potentially risky maneuver. However, I'm open to nearly any change I can reasonably make to improve the card. After installing CU info and memory tweak both, you can get a readout of your core layout, and if your card has a software lock and the correct orientation of disabled cores, you can try to re-enable these cores, making the air-cooled Fury much more like the liquid-cooled Fury X. Very unfortunately, it seems AMD started to laser cut the CUs more and more often, as is the case for my card. Certain Sapphire Tri-X models from early production seem to have the best luck in unlocking, for those of you with those models hanging around. Perhaps the biggest thing one can do for an older card, such as this Fury, is to install custom drivers. It's no secret that older cards aren't really given a priority on software features and fixes, and at some point both major GPU makers make it a point to stop providing any kind of update for their older products, and also helpfully point to their newer products for you to buy to replace that old card, leaving you now unsupported without the fixes and feature updates it might need to run newer games, or run them without massive issues. But the community has stepped up and created solutions that older, even ancient GPUs like the Terascale era cards can tap into. One of these solutions is the Radeon ID Teams packages, which are free, easy to understand, and can even allow for features like rebar to be enabled on older cards. In overclocking, we managed to crank the clock speeds of the Fury up to 1150 MHz, a near 10% increase over stock. With all these changes in tow, when combined with the much newer and optimized custom drivers, what can we really expect out of the R9 Fury and all of its unrestrained might? Starting off with synthetic benchmarks, we have the PassMark 2D, 3D, and Compute test. Here, the R9 Fury reaches 1,095 points in the 2D test, 11,068 in the 3D, and 4,522 in the Compute test. Compared to the stock results, we see an increase of 7.4, 8.9, and an increase in compute by 12.5%. A very impressive result. In FarMark 2, 1080p, 1440p, and 4K, the Overclock Fury hits 5,654, 3,792, and 1,861, respectively, resulting in a percentile increases of 2%, 3%, and 2.4%. Not an amazing increase overall, and one you'd be hard-pressed to notice in the real world should this trend continue. In 3D Mark, we start off with the Firestrike Extreme test, where the Fury climbs to 8,346, or an increase of 11.9%. In Timespy, the Fury keeps up that rampage, scoring 5,174, or an 11.8% gain. Again, more evidence of the air-cooled Fury being able to keep up with his higher-end and more expensive brothers, as it matches or slightly outpaces the Fury X. Ending the synthetic test off with superposition, in both 1080p Extreme and 4K Optimized, we see results of 10.8% and 8.3% gains. The 1080p numbers really show off the increased strength of the Fury here, again matching the Fury X, with the 4K increase putting it into spitting distance. Overall, an excellent showing for the Fury here, and one we hope to continue in real-world gaming workloads. Starting off with our custom Dolphin benchmark, we see averages of 37.2 FPS, 1% loads of 25.1, and 0.1% of 22.6. This represents an increase to the average of 16.6%, with the 1% and 0.1% lows rising 13 and 16.5% respectively, an absolutely massive change in performance. Unfortunately, in Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, the overclocked Radeon shows an average of 16.1 FPS at 1080p, which is slower than the stock results. The lows are no better, falling slightly behind the stock results as well. At 1440p, the numbers once again fall slightly behind stock, with 4K showing a drop off as well. The clock stays stable here, so I can't really point to anything in particular failing here, and not even the memory timing, since those failing would cause visual artifacting here. Moving on to Slime Rancher 2, at 1080 high, we average 60.7 FPS, a nice bump over stock, just pushing it into locked 60 FPS territory. At 1440p high, we again see a small increase in the averages, letting the overclocked Fury match the overclocked Fury Nano, interestingly. Finishing it out at 4K high, we drop all the way down to 21.3 FPS, a nearly 10 FPS drop from stock, completely reversing course from the results so far. Ending it out with Overwatch 2 in 1080p Ultra, the averages go from 97.7 all the way to 114, a dramatic 16.7% increase over stock and averages, with lows falling slightly behind. In 1440p Ultra, we hit 87.5 on average, once again improving the averages by a large amount, but now letting the lows join the improvement party. At 4K Ultra, we averaged 73.5, basically tying the stock results, but with the lows jumping up by large margins, letting this card nearly hit the 60 FPS locked mark. the R9 Fury was an interesting card to work with. The prospect of unlocking more cores is intriguing, the mirror being unlocked is frustrating, and the card itself begging to be let loose clock speed-wise led to a fun tug of war to get the most out of it. Unfortunately, the actual improvements were mixed. Sometimes it outperformed, and we would see results over 10% higher than stock, like in Slam Rancher 2, and match or outspeed the much more expensive Fury X. But then, other times, we would see regressions, and it would all come out a bit mixed. A card with just 4GB of VRAM is hard to recommend in modern times, no matter the price, but if you don't need the extra VRAM, I would say get this card over its higher end Fury family members. The extra price for those probably isn't worth it, unless the Fury X really overclocks well. We'll have to see.